The advertisement in the Denver newspaper had been precise and businesslike, offering room, board, and a comfortable life to a woman willing to become a wife to a Colorado rancher. But when Thea Montgomery stepped off the stagecoach in Ouray on that crisp October morning in 1878, clutching her worn carpetbag and squinting against the brilliant mountain sunlight, she wondered if she had made the gravest mistake of her 22 years. The town sat nestled in a box canyon, surrounded by towering peaks that seemed to scrape the sky itself, their sides already dusted with early snow despite the relatively mild temperatures in the valley below. Wooden buildings lined the main street, some freshly painted and others weathered by the harsh mountain winters. The San Juan Mountains rose up on all sides, creating a fortress of stone and pine that made Thea feel simultaneously protected and trapped. She had never seen mountains like these. Philadelphia had been flat, crowded, suffocating in its own way after her father's death had left her penniless and alone. Her aunt had made it clear that Thea's presence was an unwelcome burden, and when the position of schoolteacher she had hoped for went to the mayor's niece instead, desperation had driven her to scan the matrimonial advertisements in the back pages of the newspaper. A man stood near the general store, tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair visible beneath his worn Stetson. He held himself with a stillness that suggested either patience or uncertainty, and when his eyes met hers, Thea felt her breath catch in her throat. Even from a distance, she could see they were an unusual shade of gray-blue, like storm clouds over water. He approached slowly, removing his hat as he came near. His face was sun-weathered and strong-featured, with a straight nose and a jaw that looked like it had been carved from the very granite surrounding the town. He appeared to be in his late 20s, perhaps 30 at most, but there was something in his expression that spoke of hard-won wisdom. "Miss Montgomery." His voice was deeper than she had expected, with a rough quality that suggested he did not use it often. "Yes." Her own voice came out steadier than she felt. "You must be Mr. Anderson. Aaron Anderson." He held out his hand, and after a moment's hesitation, she took it. His palm was calloused and warm, his grip firm but careful. "Welcome to Ouray. I hope your journey was not too difficult." "It was long," Thea admitted, withdrawing her hand and immediately missing the warmth of his. The October air had a bite to it that her thin traveling coat could not quite keep out. "But I am here now." Something flickered across his face, an emotion she could not quite read. He glanced down at her single carpetbag, then back at her face. "Is that all your luggage?" Heat crept into her cheeks. "I travel light, Mr. Anderson." The truth was far less dignified. She owned almost nothing. The dress she wore was her best, a deep green wool that had once belonged to her mother. Her other dress, 2 nightgowns, some undergarments, her mother's Bible, and a small photograph of her parents made up the entirety of her worldly possessions. Aaron's expression softened slightly, as if he understood what she had not said. "My wagon is just down the street. The ranch is about 5 miles out of town. We should get moving before the afternoon clouds roll in. Weather can turn quickly up here in the mountains." She followed him to a sturdy wagon hitched to 2 large horses, both a rich chestnut color with white blazes on their faces. Aaron lifted her carpetbag into the back as if it weighed nothing, then turned to help her up onto the seat. His hands circled her waist briefly, strong and steady, and Thea felt her heart hammer in her chest at the contact. They rode in silence for the first mile, the wagon wheels crunching over the rocky road that wound alongside a rushing creek. The aspens were turning gold, their leaves shimmering in the breeze like coins, and the air smelled of pine and cold water. It was beautiful in a way that made her chest ache, so different from everything she had known. I should tell you about the ranch, Aaron finally said, his eyes fixed on the road ahead. It is not large, but it is good land. I run about 200 head of cattle, some horses. There is a main house, a barn, a bunkhouse for the hands, though I only have 2 working for me right now. It is isolated, Miss Montgomery. The nearest neighbor is 3 miles away. That does not frighten me, Thea said, though in truth, the isolation was both appealing and terrifying. And please call me Thea. He glanced at her then, really looked at her, and she saw surprise in his eyes. Thea, he repeated as if testing the name, it suits you. What made you place an advertisement for a wife? The question slipped out before she could stop it, bold and far too forward, but she needed to know. Surely there are women here in Ouray who would have been willing. Aaron's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. There are a few unmarried women in town, yes. But they are looking for miners who might strike silver and make them rich. I am just a rancher. I work hard and I make enough to live comfortably, but I will never be wealthy. I needed someone practical, someone who understood what she was getting into. And what am I getting into exactly? Thea asked quietly. He was silent for a long moment, guiding the horses around a sharp bend in the road. Hard work, long winters, a simple life. I am not an easy man, Thea. I do not talk much. I have been alone for a long time and I have gotten used to my own ways, but I would treat you well. I would never raise my hand to you, never be cruel. You would have your own space, your own time. I am not looking for someone to make my life easier, though that would be welcome. I am looking for a partner, someone to help build something lasting. His honesty was startling and unexpectedly moving. Thea found herself studying his profile, the strong line of his nose, the way his hair curled slightly where it brushed his collar. "Why did you leave wherever you came from?" she asked. "My family had a farm in Kansas," Aaron said after a pause. "My father died when I was 17, and my mother followed 2 years later. My older brother inherited the farm, and he made it clear there was no place for me there anymore. So I came west, worked on ranches in Wyoming and Montana, saved everything I could. 5 years ago, I bought this land. I have been building ever since. And now you need a wife to make it complete," Thea said, not unkindly, something like that. Aaron's voice had a wry quality to it. "Though I will admit the winters are lonely, and I am tired of my own cooking." Despite herself, Thea smiled. "I can cook," she said. "My mother taught me well. I can also sew, keep accounts, and read and write. I was hoping to be a teacher back in Philadelphia." "Why were you not?" Aaron asked, genuine curiosity in his tone. "Because I am an orphan without connections or money," Thea said simply. "The position went to someone whose family could do favors for the school board. That is how the world works." "Not out here," Aaron said firmly. "Out here, what matters is what you can do with your own 2 hands. Your past does not matter, only your future." They crested a rise, and suddenly the ranch spread out before them in a valley between 2 mountain ridges. The house was larger than Thea had expected, a solid structure of logs and stone with a wide porch and glass windows that glinted in the sunlight. The barn was even larger, painted red with white trim, and she could see cattle dotting the meadow beyond, grazing peacefully in the afternoon warmth. "This is yours," she breathed, unable to hide her amazement. "Ours," Aaron corrected quietly, "if you agree to stay." Thea turned to look at him fully, really seeing him for the first time. There was strength in his face, yes, but also loneliness. She recognized it because she had seen it in her own mirror for the past 2 years. He was a man who had built something real and solid with his own hands, but he had no one to share it with. She understood that loneliness, that ache for connection. "I came here to marry you," she said steadily. "I would not have traveled this far to turn back now." Something in Aaron's expression shifted, tension releasing from his shoulders. "The reverend in town can marry us tomorrow if that suits you. I thought you might want a night to settle in first to be sure. I have made up the guest room for you. It has a good bed and a door that locks from the inside." Thea felt a rush of gratitude for his thoughtfulness, for understanding that despite her agreement, she might need time and space to adjust to this enormous change. "Thank you," she said softly. "That is very considerate." Aaron brought the wagon to a stop in front of the house, and before Thea could move, he had jumped down and come around to her side. He reached up to help her down, and this time she did not hesitate, placing her hands on his shoulders as he lifted her easily to the ground. For a moment, they stood close together, and Thea caught the scent of him, leather and pine and something warm and masculine that made her pulse quicken. "Let me show you the house," Aaron said, stepping back and reaching into the wagon for her bag. The interior of the house was clean and well-maintained, if somewhat sparse. The main room served as both kitchen and living space, with a large stone fireplace dominating one wall and a sturdy wooden table with 4 chairs near the kitchen area. The furniture was simple but well-made, and everything was neat and orderly in a way that spoke of a man who took care of his belongings. "There are 3 bedrooms," Aaron explained, leading her down a short hallway. "Mine is at the end. This one is for you." He pushed open a door to reveal a small but comfortable room with a brass bed covered in a colorful quilt, a chest of drawers, and a washstand with a pitcher and basin. A window looked out over the meadow, framing a view of the mountains beyond. "It is lovely," Thea said honestly. The quilt was beautiful, clearly handmade with intricate stitching. "Did you make this?" "No." Aaron's voice was carefully neutral. "My mother made it. It was one of the few things I brought with me from Kansas." Thea ran her hand over the quilt, touched by the gift of something so personal. "Thank you for letting me use it." She would have wanted it to keep someone warm. Aaron set her bag on the chest of drawers. "I will let you rest and freshen up. Dinner is usually around 6. Nothing fancy, but there will be enough." After he left, closing the door quietly behind him, Thea sank onto the bed and let out a long, shaky breath. What had she done? She had agreed to marry a stranger, to live in this isolated place surrounded by mountains and wilderness, to build a life with a man she had known for less than 2 hours. But as she looked around the simple room, at the beautiful quilt and the clean wash basin and the window with its breathtaking view, she felt something unexpected stir in her chest. Not regret, but possibility. Aaron Anderson was a good man. She could sense that already. He was honest and hardworking, and he had been kind to her in ways that went beyond mere politeness. And there was something else, something she had not expected at all. When he had looked at her with those storm-gray eyes, when his hands had circled her waist, she had felt a flutter of attraction that had nothing to do with practicality or desperation. He was handsome in a rugged, distinctly Western way, and there was a quiet strength to him that called to something deep inside her. Thea stood and unpacked her meager belongings, hanging her spare dress in the small wardrobe and arranging her few toiletries on the washstand. She washed her face and hands in the cool water from the pitcher, then took down her hair and brushed it out before pinning it back up again. Her reflection in the small mirror above the washstand showed a young woman with dark hair and eyes that were more brown than green, a straight nose, and a mouth that her mother had always said was too wide. She was not beautiful, but she was not plain either. She was simply herself, and that would have to be enough. When she emerged from the bedroom, she found Aaron in the kitchen, stirring something in a large pot on the stove. He had removed his hat and coat, and she could see the way his shirt stretched across his broad shoulders as he worked. He glanced up when he heard her footsteps. "I hope you like stew," he said, It is about all I know how to make that is edible." "I like stew very much," Thea assured him. "May I help?" "There is bread in the box on the counter and butter in the cold cellar just outside the back door." Aaron pointed with his wooden spoon. "If you want to set the table, that would be helpful." They worked together in comfortable silence, and Thea found herself noticing small details about Aaron. The way he moved with an economy of motion that suggested years of physical labor. The careful way he tasted the stew and added a pinch more salt. The faint scar along his jawline that she had not noticed before. When they sat down to eat, the stew proved to be better than Aaron had suggested, hearty and flavorful with chunks of beef and vegetables. The bread was slightly stale but improved considerably with butter. They ate quietly at first, the only sounds the clink of spoons against bowls and the crackle of the fire in the stone fireplace. "Tell me about Philadelphia," Aaron finally said, breaking the silence. "What was it like?" Thea considered the question. "Crowded," she said at last. "Noisy. There were always people everywhere, and buildings so close together you could barely see the sky. After my parents died, I lived with my aunt in a townhouse that felt like a prison. Everything was about appearances, about saying the right things and knowing the right people. It felt suffocating." "I know that feeling," Aaron said quietly. "That was part of why I came west. I wanted space to breathe, to build something that was mine. Out here, a man is judged by his work, not his family name." "And what about a woman?" Thea asked, a hint of challenge in her voice. Aaron met her eyes steadily. "Same thing, your work, your character, that is what matters." They talked more easily after that, finding common ground in their shared experience of loss and their desire for something better than what they had left behind. Aaron told her about the ranch, about his plans to expand the herd and maybe add some chickens and pigs. Thea found herself caught up in his quiet enthusiasm, in the way his eyes lit up when he talked about the land. "You really love it here," she observed. "I do," Aaron admitted. "Every morning when I wake up and look out at those mountains, I feel like the luckiest man alive. Even when the work is backbreaking, even when the winters are brutal and I lose cattle to wolves or cold, I would not trade it for anything." "I hope I come to feel the same way," Thea said softly. Aaron's expression turned serious. "I know this is a big change for you. I know you are taking a leap of faith, marrying a stranger and moving to a place you have never seen before. I want you to know that I understand that, and I appreciate it. I will do everything I can to make you happy here." The sincerity in his voice made Thea's throat tighten with unexpected emotion. "Thank you," she managed. "That means more to me than you know." After dinner, Aaron insisted on cleaning up while Thea explored the house more thoroughly. The third bedroom was clearly meant to be a nursery someday, currently filled with tools and supplies. The thought of children, of a family with this quiet, serious man, sent a flutter of nervousness and anticipation through her stomach. As darkness fell and the temperature dropped, Aaron built up the fire and lit several oil lamps, filling the house with warm, golden light. They sat together in front of the fireplace, Aaron in a worn leather chair and Thea on a small sofa, and talked more about their pasts, their hopes, their fears. Thea found herself relaxing in his presence, charmed by the way he listened so intently, as if her words were the most important thing in the world. "I should let you rest," Aaron finally said as the hour grew late. "Tomorrow will be a big day." "Yes," Thea agreed, rising from the sofa. She hesitated, then added, "Thank you for today, Aaron, for being kind, for being patient. I was frightened when I stepped off that stagecoach, but you have made me feel welcome." Aaron stood as well, and for a moment they simply looked at each other across the firelit room. "I was frightened too," he admitted. I kept thinking you would take one look at me and get right back on that stage. I am glad you did not." "So am I," Thea said, and realized she meant it completely. She slept surprisingly well that night, lulled by the unfamiliar sounds of the mountain wilderness and the knowledge that beyond her locked door, Aaron Anderson slept in his own room, a man who had already begun to feel like more than just a convenient arrangement. The next morning dawned clear and bright, and Thea woke to the sound of Aaron moving around in the kitchen. She dressed carefully in her best dress, braided her hair and wound it into a coronet around her head, and emerged to find Aaron similarly dressed in clean trousers and a white shirt, his hair still damp from washing. "You look beautiful," he said simply, and the admiration in his eyes made her cheeks warm. "You look very handsome yourself," Thea replied, and watched a faint flush creep up his neck. They ate a quick breakfast, then Aaron hitched the wagon again for the drive back into Ouray. The morning air was crisp and cold, and Thea was grateful when Aaron pulled a thick wool blanket from behind the seat and tucked it around her lap. His fingers brushed hers as he arranged the fabric, and she felt that same spark of awareness that had struck her the day before. The church in Ouray was a small white building with a steeple that pointed toward the brilliant blue sky. Reverend Matthews was a jovial man in his 50s with kind eyes and a booming voice. He did not seem at all surprised by their arrival, suggesting that mail-order marriages were not uncommon in this rough mining town. "You have witnesses?" the Reverend asked. "We need at least 2. "I can fetch some folks from the general store," Aaron said. But before he could leave, the church door opened and a weathered cowboy with a graying mustache stepped inside, followed by a younger man with red hair and a friendly smile. "Thought you might need us, boss," the older man said with a grin. "We saw your wagon come into town." "Thea, these are my ranch hands," Aaron introduced them. "Frank Carson, who has been with me since I bought the place, and Jimmy Raid, who signed on last spring." "Pleased to meet you, madam," Frank said, removing his hat. "Aaron is a good man. You will be happy with him." "Very pleased," Jimmy echoed, his ears turning red as he nodded respectfully. With the witnesses secured, the ceremony proceeded quickly. Thea stood beside Aaron in front of the simple altar, acutely aware of his presence, his warmth, the steady way he held her hand as Reverend Matthews read the familiar words. When it came time for the vows, Aaron's voice was low but firm, his eyes never leaving hers as he promised to love, honor, and cherish her for all the days of his life. Thea's own voice shook slightly as she repeated the words, but she meant every one of them. This man was her husband now, for better or worse, and she would do everything in her power to make their marriage a true partnership. "You may kiss your bride," Reverend Matthews announced with a broad smile. Aaron hesitated for just a moment, his eyes searching hers for permission. Then he leaned in slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted to. Thea closed her eyes as his lips met hers, soft and warm and achingly gentle. It was her first kiss, and her heart hammered so hard she was certain he must feel it. When they pulled apart, his hand came up to cup her cheek briefly, his thumb brushing across her skin in a touch that felt like a promise. "Congratulations, Mr. and Mrs. Anderson," the Reverend proclaimed, and Frank let out a whoop that echoed through the small church. After they signed the marriage certificate and said their goodbyes, Aaron took Thea to the general store, where he insisted on buying her warmer clothes for the coming winter. She tried to protest the expense, but he was adamant. "You are my wife now," he said firmly. "It is my responsibility and my privilege to provide for you. Besides, you will need these things. Winter comes hard and fast in the mountains." Thea selected practical items, a heavy wool coat, sturdy boots, warm gloves, and several yards of fabric that she could make into new dresses. Erin added a beautiful shawl in deep blue that brought out the color of her eyes, and when she protested, he simply smiled and carried it to the counter along with everything else. They stopped at the small restaurant next to the hotel for a wedding meal, and Erin ordered the best steaks the establishment could provide, along with potatoes and vegetables, and even a slice of apple pie for each of them. Other diners glanced their way curiously, and Thea realized that news of Erin's mail-order bride would be all over town by evening. "Let them look," Erin said quietly, noticing her discomfort. "They will get used to you soon enough. Ouray is a good town, full of decent people. They will accept you." "I hope so," Thea murmured. "I would like to have friends here." "You will," Erin assured her. "Give it time." The ride back to the ranch felt different now that they were married. Thea was hyper-aware of Erin beside her, of the way his thigh brushed hers as the wagon swayed over the rough road, of his strong hands holding the reins. She was his wife. Tonight, she would share his bed, would give herself to him in the most intimate way possible. The thought sent a confusing mix of nervousness and anticipation coursing through her. Erin must have sensed her anxiety because he reached over and took her hand, lacing their fingers together. "Thea," he said quietly, "I want you to know that nothing has to happen tonight that you are not ready for. I know this is all happening very fast. We can take our time, get to know each other better first." Thea looked at their joined hands, at the contrast of his sun-bronzed skin against her paler fingers. "You would do that?" she asked. "Wait, even though I am your wife, of course." Erin's voice was firm. "I did not marry you just to have a woman in my bed, though I will not pretend I do not want that eventually. I married you because I want a partner, a companion. I want whatever happens between us to mean something to both of us." His words dissolved much of Thea's nervousness, replacing it with a warm affection for this man who had already shown her more respect and consideration than she had dared to hope for. "I appreciate that," she said softly. "But Erin, I am ready. I am nervous, yes, but I want to be a true wife to you." She saw him swallow hard, saw the way his grip on the reins tightened slightly. "Are you certain?" "I am certain," Thea said, and squeezed his hand to emphasize her words. When they arrived back at the ranch, the afternoon sun was slanting long shadows across the meadow. Erin unhitched the horses and tended to them while Thea carried her packages inside. She put away her new clothes, running her hands over the soft fabric of the blue shawl and smiling at the memory of Erin insisting she have it. She started preparing dinner, exploring the well-stocked pantry, and finding everything she needed to make a proper meal. By the time Erin came in from the barn, the house was filled with the warm sense of roasting chicken and baking biscuits, and Thea had set the table with care, even finding a jar of wildflowers to place in the center. "This smells incredible," Erin said, genuine appreciation in his voice. "I have not had a home-cooked meal like this since my mother died." They ate slowly, talking and laughing more easily now that the wedding ceremony was behind them. Erin told her about the ranch hands, about Frank's dry sense of humor and Jimmy's habit of singing off-key while he worked. Thea shared stories from her childhood in Philadelphia, about her father's bookshop, and the way her mother had always insisted on fresh flowers in every room. After dinner, they washed the dishes together, working side by side at the big kitchen sink. Their hands brushed frequently in the soapy water, and each touch seemed to carry an electric charge. When the last dish was dried and put away, Erin turned to Thea and held out his hand. "Dance with me," he asked. "There is no music," Thea pointed out, even as she placed her hand in his. "We do not need music," Erin said, pulling her gently into his arms. They swayed together in the quiet kitchen, lit only by the soft glow of oil lamps and the dying fire. Aaron held her carefully, one hand at her waist and the other cradling her hand against his chest. Thea could feel the steady beat of his heart beneath her palm, could smell the clean scent of soap and the underlying warmth that was uniquely him. "I never thought this could feel so right so quickly," Aaron murmured, his lips close to her ear. "I was prepared for awkwardness, for difficulty adjusting, but being with you feels natural." "I feel the same way," Thea admitted, tilting her head back to look up at him. "It is strange, but I feel like I have known you much longer than 2 days." Aaron's hand tightened at her waist. "Thea," he said, his voice rough with emotion and desire, "may I take you to bed now?" Heat flooded through her at his words, and she nodded, not trusting her voice. Aaron extinguished the lamps one by one, then took her hand and led her down the hallway to his bedroom, to their bedroom now. He had lit a single lamp beside the bed, filling the room with a warm, intimate glow. "If you want to stop at any point, just tell me," Aaron said, turning to face her. His hands came up to cup her face, his thumbs stroking her cheeks. "I want this to be good for you." Thea reached up and began unbuttoning his shirt, her fingers trembling slightly but determined. "Teach me," she whispered. "Show me how to please you." Aaron's breath hitched, and he helped her remove his shirt, then slowly, reverently, began to unfasten the buttons of her dress. Each revelation of skin was met with a gentle touch, a soft kiss, until Thea stood before him in only her chemise and he in only his trousers. He lifted her easily and laid her on the bed, then stretched out beside her, propping himself up on one elbow so he could look down at her. "You are so beautiful," he said, his hand tracing the line of her jaw, her neck, the curve of her shoulder. "I am the luckiest man alive." What followed was tender and slow, Aaron guiding her with patience and care, making sure she felt pleasure even in the moments of discomfort. He kissed away the tears that leaked from the corners of her eyes, murmured reassurances and praise, and when it was over, he held her close, her head on his chest and his arms wrapped securely around her. "Are you all right?" he asked, his hand stroking through her unbound hair. "I am wonderful," Thea said honestly, pressing a kiss to his bare chest. "That was better than I expected." She felt him smile against the top of her head. "It will be even better next time once you are used to it." They lay together in comfortable silence, and Thea found herself thinking about how much her life had changed in just 2 days. She had gone from being alone and unwanted in Philadelphia to being a wife, a partner, cherished by a good man in this wild and beautiful place. "Aaron," she said softly. "Yes, I am glad I answered your advertisement. I am glad I came here." His arms tightened around her. "So am I, Thea, so am I." The next few weeks passed in a blur of adjustment and discovery. Thea learned the rhythms of ranch life, rising early to make breakfast for Aaron and the hands, spending her days cleaning, cooking, mending, and gradually making the house feel like a home. She planted an herb garden near the kitchen door, made curtains for the windows from some of the fabric Aaron had bought her, and rearranged the furniture to create more comfortable living spaces. Aaron proved to be an attentive husband, always considerate of her needs and feelings. He taught her to ride one of the gentler horses, a pretty mare named Daisy, and took her on long rides through the surrounding countryside, showing her the boundaries of the ranch and the best views of the mountains. They talked for hours about everything and nothing, and Thea found herself falling deeper in love with him each day. Because that was what was happening, she realized. She was falling in love with her husband. It was not just attraction or gratitude or even companionship, though those were all part of it. It was the way he looked at her in the mornings, his hair tousled and his eyes soft. It was the way he always saved the best piece of meat for her at dinner, It was the gentle way he made love to her at night, as if she were something precious and rare. One evening in early November, as they sat together on the porch watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of pink and gold, Thea leaned her head against Aaron's shoulder and said, "I love you." She felt him go still, then slowly turned to look at her. His eyes were wide with wonder and something that looked like joy. "You do?" "I do," Thea confirmed, lifting her head to meet his gaze. "I know it has not been very long, but I cannot help how I feel. You are the kindest, most honorable man I have ever known, and every day I wake up grateful that I am your wife." Aaron pulled her into his lap, his arms wrapping around her as he buried his face in her hair. "I love you too," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I think I started falling for you the moment you stepped off that stagecoach, looking so brave and scared at the same time. You are everything I hoped for and so much more." They kissed there on the porch as the stars began to emerge in the darkening sky, and Thea felt a completeness she had never known before. This was where she belonged, in this wild place, with this good man. They had found each other against all odds, and they would build a life together that mattered. The first snow came in mid-November, transforming the ranch into a wonderland of white. Thea stood at the kitchen window, marveling at the beauty of it when Aaron came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist. "What do you think?" he asked, resting his chin on top of her head. "It is beautiful," Thea breathed, "like something from a dream." "It will be even more beautiful when it gets deeper," Aaron said. "But it also means we will be mostly snowed in for the next few months. Just you and me and a whole lot of quiet. Think you can stand being stuck with me for that long?" Thea turned in his arms and kissed him. "I cannot think of anything I would like more." Winter settled over the ranch in earnest, and the rhythm of their days changed. Aaron still had to go out in all weather to check on the cattle and horses, to break ice on water troughs and make sure the animals had enough feed. But he spent more time in the house now, and Thea loved the long evenings by the fire, reading aloud to each other or simply talking. Frank and Jimmy moved into the bunkhouse for the winter, and Thea made sure to send hot meals out to them regularly, earning their eternal gratitude. They came up to the main house for dinner every Sunday, and Thea found herself becoming fond of both men. Frank, with his dry wit and surprising sensitivity, and Jimmy, who blushed and stammered whenever she spoke to him but worked harder than anyone she had ever known. Christmas came, and Thea made it special despite their isolation. She baked cookies and made a special dinner, and Aaron surprised her with a beautiful necklace he had ordered from a catalog, a delicate silver chain with a small turquoise pendant. "It matches your eyes in certain lights," he said as he fastened it around her neck. "I wanted you to have something to remember our first Christmas together." Thea had knitted him a warm scarf and mittens, practical gifts, but made with love in every stitch. Aaron wore them every day afterward, even when he had other options, and the sight of him in the things she had made filled her with quiet pride. January brought the coldest temperatures yet, and one morning Thea woke up feeling unwell. She barely made it to the wash basin before she was sick, and Aaron held her hair back with gentle hands, his face creased with worry. "Maybe I should ride into town for the doctor," he said as she rinsed her mouth. "No," Thea said quickly. "It is too dangerous in this weather. Besides, I think I know what this is." Understanding dawned in Aaron's eyes. "You think you might be pregnant?" "I do," Thea said, placing a hand over her still flat stomach. "I am late, and this sickness, it feels like what my mother described when she was carrying me." Aaron's face transformed with joy, and he swept her up in his arms despite her protests that she was all sweaty and rumpled. "We are going to have a baby," he said, spinning her around before setting her gently back on her feet. "Thea, You have made me the happiest man alive." Thea laughed, feeling her own joy rising to match his. "We do not know for certain yet," she cautioned. "But yes, I think we are." "I have to tell Frank and Jimmy," Aaron said, already heading for the door. "Aaron, it is barely dawn," Thea called after him. But he was already gone, racing through the snow toward the bunkhouse in his shirt sleeves, too excited to even grab his coat. The winter seemed to pass more quickly after that, each day bringing them closer to spring and to the birth of their child. Thea's stomach began to swell, and Aaron treated her as if she were made of glass, trying to do all the heavy work around the house himself, until she finally had to tell him to stop fussing. "I am pregnant, not an invalid," she said firmly. "Let me do my work. It is good for me." But she loved his protectiveness, loved the way he would place his hand on her belly and talk to the baby, telling their unborn child about the ranch and the mountains and all the adventures they would have together. Spring arrived with an explosion of wildflowers and the return of the cattle to the high meadows. Aaron was busy from dawn to dusk now, repairing fences and checking on new calves, but he always made time for Thea, always made sure she was comfortable and happy. In early June, with the aspen leaves a brilliant green and the air warm and sweet, Thea's labor began. Aaron sent Jimmy racing into town for the midwife, while he stayed with Thea, holding her hand and wiping her forehead with a cool cloth. The midwife arrived just in time, a capable woman named Helen who had delivered half the babies in the county. The labor was long and difficult, and there were moments when Thea thought she could not go on. But Aaron never left her side, his presence giving her strength when her own failed. Finally, as the sun set in a blaze of color outside the bedroom window, their baby entered the world with a lusty cry. "You have a son," Helen announced, placing the squirming, red-faced infant on Thea's chest. "A fine, healthy boy." Thea looked down at her son, at his perfect tiny fingers and the dark fuzz of hair on his head, and felt her heart expand with a love so fierce it almost hurt. Beside her, Aaron reached out a trembling hand to touch the baby's cheek. "He is perfect," Aaron said, his voice choked with emotion. "Thea, you are amazing. I love you so much." "I love you too," Thea whispered, tears streaming down her face as she looked from her husband to her son. "What should we name him?" "I was thinking Thomas," Aaron said, "after your father." Fresh tears spilled over at his thoughtfulness. "Thomas Aaron Anderson," Thea said, testing the name. "It is perfect." The months that followed were exhausting and wonderful in equal measure. Thomas was a healthy baby with good lungs and a healthy appetite, keeping Thea busy day and night. But Aaron was a devoted father, walking the floor with Thomas when he was fussy, changing nappies without complaint, and looking at his son with such open adoration that it made Thea fall in love with him all over again. As Thomas grew from a newborn to a chubby, smiling infant, Thea found herself settling more deeply into her role as a rancher's wife. She made friends in town, particularly with other ranch wives who understood the challenges and rewards of mountain life. She started a small vegetable garden that flourished in the mountain sun, providing fresh produce for their table. The ranch itself continued to prosper. Aaron's careful management and hard work paid off with healthy calves and good sales each fall. He hired another hand, a young man named David who had just arrived from Texas looking for work. With 3 men now helping with the ranch work, Aaron was able to spend more time with Thea and Thomas, and those hours together became the highlight of Thea's days. One evening in late summer, as Thomas napped in his cradle and dinner simmered on the stove, Aaron pulled Thea onto his lap as he sat in his leather chair. "I have been thinking," he said, his arms around her waist. Do you remember when I placed that advertisement, how I said I was looking for a wife for the ranch? I remember, Thea said, playing with the hair at the nape of his neck. I was wrong, Aaron said, his gray-blue eyes serious. I thought I needed a wife to help with the work, to make the ranch more successful. But what I really needed was you, Thea. You, specifically. Not just any woman, but the brave, beautiful, kind woman who stepped off that stagecoach and took a chance on a lonely rancher. You did not just become my wife, you became my partner, my best friend, the love of my life. You made this house a home. You gave me a son. You gave me a reason to build something that lasts. Thea felt tears prick her eyes. You gave me all of that too, she said softly. When I left Philadelphia, I thought I was just running away from a bad situation. I did not dare hope that I would find real love, real happiness. But I found it with you, Aaron. Every single day, I wake up grateful for you, for Thomas, for this life we have built together. Aaron kissed her then, long and slow and sweet, and Thea melted into him, marveling at how this man still made her heart race after more than a year of marriage. The years that followed were full and rich. Thomas grew into a sturdy little boy with his father's gray-blue eyes and his mother's dark hair, following Aaron around the ranch like a devoted shadow. When Thomas was 3, Thea gave birth to a daughter they named Alice, a delicate beauty with blonde curls and a sunny disposition. 2 years later came another son, Matthew, who had Aaron's quiet nature and Thea's love of books. The ranch continued to thrive, growing from 200 head of cattle to nearly 500. Aaron bought more land, expanding their holdings and solidifying their place as one of the most successful ranches in the Ouray area. Frank eventually retired and moved into a small house in town, though he still came out to visit regularly. Jimmy married a girl from town and started his own small ranch on land adjacent to theirs, remaining a close friend and neighbor. Through it all, Thea and Aaron's love only deepened. They weathered difficult winters and dry summers, periods of plenty and times of hardship. They nursed each other through illness, celebrated each other's triumphs, and held each other through moments of sorrow, like when news reached them that Thea's aunt in Philadelphia had died, or when they lost cattle to a particularly harsh winter storm. But the joy far outweighed the sorrow. Watching their children grow and thrive, seeing the ranch prosper through their combined efforts, stealing moments alone together when they could, these things filled their days with purpose and their hearts with contentment. On a warm October evening in 1888, exactly 10 years after Thea had first arrived in Ouray, Aaron surprised her by arranging for Jimmy's wife Sarah to watch the children so he could take Thea into town. She thought they were just going to dinner, but instead, Aaron drove the wagon past the restaurant to the edge of town, to a spot overlooking the valley where they could see the ranch in the distance, the house and barn looking small but solid against the backdrop of the mountains. "This is where I stopped the first time I came to Ouray," Aaron said, helping Thea down from the wagon. "I stood right here and looked out at this valley and thought, this is it. This is where I want to build my life." "It is beautiful," Thea said, leaning against him as they looked out over the landscape gilded by the setting sun. "It was missing something, though," Aaron continued. "I did not realize it at the time, but this place, the ranch, all of it was just empty success without someone to share it with. And then you came, and suddenly everything made sense. You were the missing piece, Thea. You are still the missing piece, every single day." Thea turned in his arms to face him, her hands coming up to cup his face. There were lines around his eyes now that had not been there 10 years ago, and silver threads beginning to show in his dark hair. But he was still the most handsome man she had ever seen, and the love in his eyes when he looked at her had only grown stronger with time. You gave me a home when I had none, Thea said, her voice thick with emotion. You gave me love when I thought I would spend my life alone. You gave me children, a family, a purpose. Everything good in my life started the day I stepped off that stagecoach and saw you standing there. I came here thinking I was settling for a practical arrangement, but instead, I found my soulmate. Aaron kissed her as the sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink and purple. And Thea thought about that young woman who had arrived in Ouray 10 years ago, frightened and uncertain, but trying to be brave. That woman could never have imagined how rich her life would become, how deep love could run, how a practical arrangement could transform into something truly magical. They stood there together as the stars began to emerge, watching the lights come on in their ranch house in the distance, where their children were safe and warm and loved. The wind carried the scent of pine and coming snow, the familiar smell of the mountains that had become home. We should get back, Thea finally said. The children will be wondering where we are. In a minute, Aaron said, pulling her closer. Let me just hold you here for one more minute. So Thea let herself be held, let herself remember and dream and simply be grateful. She had come west looking for security and found love instead. She had married a rancher who needed a wife and discovered a partner who cherished her soul. Together, they had built something real and lasting, not just in the ranch that prospered around them, but in the family they had created and the love that sustained them through every season. As they finally climbed back into the wagon and headed home, Thea looked back one more time at the valley spread out below them. This was her home now, truly and completely. These mountains that had once seemed so foreign now cradled her heart. This wild place had tamed her fears and freed her spirit. And the man beside her, the rancher who had advertised for a practical wife, had given her the greatest gift of all, a love that would last all the days of her life. When they arrived home, they were greeted by the happy chaos of their 3 children, Thomas trying to tell them about something exciting that had happened, while Matthew talked over him, and Alice climbed into Aaron's arms demanding to be swung around. Sarah laughed and gathered her things to head home, and Frank, who had stopped by for a visit, tipped his hat and made his own departure. After the children were finally in bed, their faces scrubbed clean and their prayers said, Aaron and Thea stood together in the doorway of the nursery, looking at their sleeping children. Did you ever imagine this? Thea whispered. When you placed that advertisement, did you think you would end up here with all of this? I hoped, Aaron admitted quietly. I hoped for something like this, but what we have is better than anything I could have imagined. You are better than anything I could have imagined. They walked hand in hand to their own bedroom, the room where Thea had been so nervous on their wedding night 10 years ago. Now, it was familiar and comfortable, filled with the accumulation of their shared life together. Aaron pulled her close as they prepared for bed, his hands gentle as he helped her with the buttons of her dress. I never get tired of this, he murmured against her hair, of being with you, holding you, loving you. Good, Thea said, smiling as she turned in his arms. Because we have many more years ahead of us, and I plan to make the most of every single one. They made love slowly, tenderly, with the ease of long familiarity and the passion that had never dimmed. Afterward, as they lay tangled together in the darkness, Aaron whispered, Thank you. For what? Thea asked sleepily, For answering my advertisement, for taking a chance, for loving me, for giving me everything I never knew I needed. Thea pressed a kiss to his chest right over his heart. Thank you for the same. I love you, Aaron Anderson. I love you too, Thea Anderson, always. The years continued to roll by, each one bringing new challenges and new joys. The children grew tall and strong, learning to ride and work the ranch alongside their father. Thomas proved to have a natural talent with horses, and Aaron began letting him help train the young ones. Alice surprised them all by developing a keen head for numbers, keeping meticulous records of the ranch's finances in neat columns. Matthew, quietest of the three, showed an artistic bent, filling sketchbooks with drawings of the mountains and animals and family scenes. When Thomas turned 16 in 1894, Aaron decided it was time to expand the ranch's operations even further. He and Thea sat down together at the kitchen table, as they had done for every major decision over the years, and discussed the possibilities. "We could add sheep," Aaron suggested. "There is good grazing on the high meadows that the cattle do not use." "Or we could focus on horses," Thea countered. "Thomas has such a gift with them, and there is always demand for good working horses." They talked late into the night, weighing options and making plans, and finally decided to do both, starting small with each venture and seeing what worked best. It was this kind of partnership, this mutual respect and shared decision-making, that had made their marriage and their ranch successful. The new ventures prospered, and by the turn of the century, the Anderson Ranch was one of the most respected in all of Colorado. But Aaron and Thea never forgot where they had started, never took their success for granted. They were generous with their workers, fair in their dealings, and kind to those in need. When hard times hit neighboring ranches, they were always ready to help with loans of money or supplies or labor. In 1901, Thomas married a sweet girl from town named Emma, and they built a house on the far edge of the ranch property. Watching her son become a husband, and then a father, made Thea acutely aware of the passage of time, but also deeply grateful for the life she had lived. Her children were happy and healthy, her marriage was strong, and her place in this mountain community was secure. Alice shocked them all by announcing at 18 that she wanted to go to college in Denver to study business. Aaron was hesitant at first, worried about his daughter so far from home, but Thea convinced him to let her go. "She has the same courage I did when I got on that train to come here," Thea argued. "We have to let her chase her dreams." So Alice went to Denver, and though they missed her terribly, they were proud of her determination and independence. She wrote long letters home describing her classes and her life in the city, and Thea treasured every word. Matthew, at 15, showed no signs of wanting to leave the ranch. He loved the land and the animals as much as his father did, but his artistic nature gave him a different perspective. He talked about capturing the beauty of the mountains in paintings, about maybe having his work shown in galleries someday. Aaron and Thea encouraged him, just as they had encouraged all their children to pursue their passions. One evening in the spring of 1903, as Thea and Aaron sat on the porch watching the sunset, 25 years after that first meeting in Ouray, Aaron took her hand and squeezed it gently. "Do you have any regrets?" he asked quietly. "About answering that advertisement about leaving your old life behind?" Thea looked at him, at the man who had been her husband, her partner, her love for all these years. His hair was mostly silver now, and deep lines bracketed his mouth and eyes, but he was still strong and capable, still the man she had fallen in love with. "Not a single one," she said firmly. "This life, this place, it has all been more than I ever dreamed possible. I was so scared when I stepped off that stagecoach, but looking back, it was the bravest and best thing I ever did." "I was scared too," Aaron admitted. "Terrified that you would take one look at me and the ranch and realize you had made a terrible mistake. But you stayed, and you made this place, made me, better than I ever could have been alone." "We made each other better," Thea corrected gently. "That is what love does, I think. It takes two people and makes them stronger together than they ever were apart." Aaron pulled her close, and they sat together as the light faded from the sky and the first stars appeared. From inside the house, they could hear Matthew playing the piano they had bought him for his last birthday, the notes spilling out through the open windows. Down the hill, they could see lights in Thomas and Emma's house, where their grandchildren were probably being put to bed. And somewhere in Denver, Alice was pursuing her dreams, carrying with her the strength and courage she had learned from her parents. "We did good," Aaron said softly. "With the ranch, with the children, with everything." "We did," Thea agreed. "We did very good." As they sat there together, Thea thought about all the advertisements she had looked at that day in Philadelphia, all the different paths her life could have taken. But fate, or luck, or maybe just something meant to be, had led her to Aaron Anderson's simple, honest words in the newspaper. He had been looking for a wife to help with his ranch, someone practical and hardworking to share the burden of building a life in the mountains. Instead, he had found her, and she had found him. They had needed each other in ways neither of them had fully understood at first. And through love, patience, hard work, and unwavering commitment to each other, they had built something far more valuable than just a successful ranch. They had built a true partnership, a deep and abiding love, a family that would carry on long after they were gone. The rancher had needed a wife for his ranch, yes. But what he had truly needed, what they had both needed, was a partner for the heart. And in finding each other, they had found everything. The moon rose over the mountains, silver and bright, casting long shadows across the meadow where the cattle grazed peacefully. Inside the house, Matthew's music shifted to a gentle waltz, and Aaron stood, holding out his hand to Thea. "Dance with me," he asked, just as he had on their wedding night 25 years before. "Always," Thea said, taking his hand and letting him pull her to her feet. They danced there on the porch under the stars, moving slowly to the music drifting from inside, holding each other close. And Thea knew, with absolute certainty, that she would do it all again in a heartbeat. Every moment of fear and uncertainty, every challenge they had faced, every sacrifice they had made, it had all been worth it to end up here in this place with this man, living this beautiful life they had created together. They had started as strangers brought together by necessity and chance. But they had become so much more. They had become partners, lovers, best friends, parents, and grandparents. They had become each other's home in the truest sense of the word. And their love, forged in the wild beauty of the Colorado mountains, would endure as long as the peaks themselves. As the years continued to unfold, that love remained the foundation of everything they built. When Aaron's health began to fail in his late 60s, Thea nursed him with tender devotion, and he recovered to enjoy several more years of riding the ranch and spoiling his grandchildren. When Thea had a scare with pneumonia a few years later, Aaron barely left her side until she was well again. They celebrated their 30th anniversary in 1908 with all 3 children present, along with Thomas's growing family and Alice, who had married a businessman in Denver but still came home regularly. Matthew had indeed become an accomplished artist, his paintings of mountain scenes selling in galleries throughout Colorado. But he still lived on the ranch, unable to imagine leaving the place he loved. Standing in their parlor surrounded by children and grandchildren, looking at the faces of the family they had created, Aaron and Thea shared a long look that communicated everything words could not. They had succeeded beyond their wildest dreams, not in wealth or status, but in the things that truly mattered. As the party wound down and the guests departed, Thea and Aaron once again found themselves alone on their porch, watching the stars wheel overhead in the clear mountain sky. 30 years, Aaron mused. It seems like forever and like no time at all. I know exactly what you mean, Thea said, resting her head on his shoulder. Sometimes I still feel like that frightened girl stepping off the stage coach, and sometimes I look at you and cannot remember a time when you were not the center of my world. You are the center of mine, Aaron said simply. You always have been, from that very first moment. I looked at you standing there in your green dress, trying so hard to be brave, and something in my heart just knew. You were mine, and I was yours, and everything else was just details. Thea lifted her head to kiss him, this man who had been her everything for 3 decades, who had given her a life beyond her wildest imaginings. I love you, she whispered against his lips. I will love you until my last breath and beyond. And I love you, Aaron replied, holding her close. My Thea, my heart, my home. They sat together as the night deepened around them, two people who had taken a chance on each other all those years ago and had reaped rewards beyond measure. The rancher had placed an advertisement seeking a wife to help with his ranch, a practical arrangement to ease the burden of running a homestead alone. But what he had found instead was a partner for his heart, a love that transformed his life and made every day an adventure worth living. And the young woman who had answered that advertisement, desperate and scared and hopeful, had found far more than just security and a place to belong. She had found her soulmate, her true home, and a love story for the ages, written not in grand gestures but in the quiet, everyday moments of a life well lived and a partnership honored. As the stars blazed overhead and the mountain breeze whispered through the pines, Aaron and Thea Anderson held each other close and gave thanks for the day that a simple advertisement had brought them together. They had needed each other in ways neither had fully understood, and in finding each other, they had found everything that mattered. Their legacy would live on in their children and grandchildren, in the ranch they had built together, and in the enduring truth that real love, the kind that lasts a lifetime, is worth any risk, any leap of faith, any journey into the unknown. The rancher had needed a wife for his ranch, but he had found something infinitely more precious. He had found a partner for his heart, and together they had built a love that would echo through generations, a testament to the power of taking chances, of opening your heart, and of believing that somewhere out there, someone is waiting who will see you truly and love you completely, just as you are. And that, in the end, was everything.